The Antifada is more than a podcast. It's a specter haunting the globe.
It is the synthesis of the two most frightening things for the cheerleaders of this reactionary hell world.
One ravaged by the unbounded savagery of capital and its states.
Antifa super soldiers and Intifada.
Bash the fash of a global uprising.
Be prepared to enter.
The Antifada mindset. I'm Jamie Peck.
And I'm Sean KB.
And we are broadcasting not live from Leftist Fest headquarters, about a half-hour walk from the gentrification-ravaged Gowanus Canal in the coastal elite bubble of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA.
That's right. And we are proud to introduce today a special guest, a last-minute guest, Andrew Callaway. Say hello to the folks.
Our new friend.
Hey there, how you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
We always like to talk a little bit about our history with our guests that we have on the show.
That's right.
Andrew and I go way back to earlier today.
Oh yeah, so far back. It feels like years though.
This
Yeah,
is a pretty good story, actually. We had unfortunately a guest fall through, so at the last minute, Jamie came through in the clutch and found Andrew, and he came by literally last minute. We're recording about 10 o'clock right now, and I think you hit him up around 8:30, and he was here in no time at all.
Well,
You just picked me up at the DSA convention.
I just found him on the street. I was like, hey, man, you want to be on our podcast? It's about politics. And he was like, cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Was it the cardboard sign he had that said "Will Pod for Food"?
That might have played a small role in it.
I am actually just here to advertise my podcast.
Yes, please.
Which is called Benjamin Walker's Theory of Everything. I'm like the sidekick, so it's not my theory of everything, but you should still listen to it.
All right.
We have a
check it
segment
out.
about DSA in it. I don't know how much you guys talk about DSA on your show.
Decent about,
A
yeah.
bit.
Yeah, so but
Cool.
you should listen to it. It's about the Possadists.
Oh, nice.
Utopia Part 3.
We are pro-Passad on this podcast for sure.
Our segment was pro Passad too.
Nice.
We had on Ravi and a certain Mr. Website.
Oh, so here's a question we like to ask everyone we have on our show, and that is, how pure is your hate today?
How pure is my hate today?
It's an honest question. Be honest.
Oh wow, today I think it was purer than most days. Actually, I don't know if it was just like the DSA convention like remade me mad about everything that I'm mad about.
It's very possible.
But no, I think today is a particuandrew pure day.
That is excellent. That's great to
Excellent.
hear. We picked the
Wow.
right guy off the street, I tell
Good
you.
find. Yeah. I mean, just to clarify, Andrew is a DSA comrade of mine who I have never talked to until pretty much just now. But we were all drinking at a bar after the convention today, which was very long and eventful. We had a little group chat going for the North Brooklyn DSA to discuss resolutions and whatnot. So when I found out our guest wasn't coming, and I had just left the bar and come here, I was like, oh shit. Hey guys, does anyone want to come on our show? And he was so down.
And
Well, at first I did not. I was like, oh, gee, if you expect me to talk like good political things about the convention, like wrong guy. But you said you were going to talk about incels.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, maybe that I can talk about.
So as an incel, you said this is right in my wheelhouse. Again, we found the right guy.
Indeed. You know, sometimes the stars are aligned.
Well, I think that there's actually some interesting things that happened today that at your convention that you guys want to talk about. Before we jump into that, just a couple administrative things. We wanted to give a big shout out to all of our patrons. We're up to almost 100 right now. Also, the moderators on our Discord community, which is growing by the day.
Hell yeah.
And is really fun. There's really good political conversation, but also just fun chatting and voice chat and all that. And especially a big shout out to Brian Diamond from Minnesota, who came through with a very, very nice large pledge that we didn't even ask him for, but he offered it of his own volition. So thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. And just so folks remember, when we get to the strange number of 183 patrons, which we're more than halfway there, we will be releasing first episode of Acid Kitchen.
Oh, God. Possibly the last as well. We'll see.
May I ask?
Let's see
as
how it
the
goes.
Guest, as the ignorant guest, what Acid Kitchen is?
We could give you the lowdown maybe after the show. Jamie might give a little teaser right now for the fans.
It's a cooking show.
That's it. That's all you get.
Yeah, so anyway, we had a pretty fun time at the convention today, didn't we, Andrew?
it was great. Although I would like to give a shout out to comrade Charlotte Albrecht, who I just discovered injured her foot and is at the ER right now.
Right now?
Right now.
She was fine when I left.
Yeah.
Was it a bar?
It was at the bar.
Oh, no.
Bar. Yeah. But she's one of my heroes. So.
Yeah,
Wow.
she's great.
Bar-related injuries.
In
I've
fact,
been there.
Shout out to Charlotte. She was actually the one who encouraged me to run for delegate. So if it weren't for her, I probably wouldn't have gone.
Me too.
Oh, no shit.
Well,
and she had to convince me.
Well, it's
I was like, oh, I don't know. Okay. You twisted my arm.
Given that history, you probably shouldn't have Tanya Harding to in order to take her position. But just saying. I hope you have an alibi for that bar incident that happened.
It's politics for you.
I will say, I said she had to convince me, but as soon as I expressed a reservation, she was like, "Oh, it's okay, you don't have to." And I was like, "Well, fuck that. Now I want to."
Now you got to do
Yeah,
it.
reverse psychology. Very smart, Charlotte. Very smart.
So yeah, what sort of were there some interesting proposals today at the convention?
There were indeed. One I was very surprised got voted up so quickly. I was sort of lining up to say something against it, and it was too late. I hesitated for too long, and it just passed immediately. But it was a resolution to encourage all the DSA members to get rank and file union jobs so as to radicalize their unions.
Not their unions, but the unions they would potentially be joining.
They would become theirs. And
is this like salting?
Well, salting is when you join when you get a job somewhere for the purpose of unionizing it.
You're right. Yeah, it's a little different.
This is like getting a union job for the purpose of radicalizing your union.
It's similar in just the espionage aspect.
Yeah.
There's a term for it. The two actually. One is industrializing. So there's a history of that on the left. The U.S. going back to the Communist Party in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and then also trot groups like the Socialist Workers' Party in the 1970s. So industrializing is one term, and entryism is the other. So it's a bit of a well-worn tactic on the left. You guys can, because you're more involved in the convention than I am, kind of give your take on it, and then I can maybe throw in a little history and maybe some pessimistic perspective on it.
Well, I was doubtful as to whether or not this was a good idea because I know it's been tried in the past to varying degrees of success. And I know who's in the DSA right now. And
who is it?
I like us very much, but it is, shall we say, a very small slice of the working class.
Okay.
We tend to be like millennial creative class kind of marshmallowy. We're like
downwardly mobile. There's definitely
yes.
a large overrepresentation of the
fail son
creative
caucus
class, so
right.
to speak.
Yeah, and I'd say we're more racially diverse than people think we are, but we could certainly be more so. But it tends to be a certain cultural milieu.
So the hipster caucus is like 90%. They get every proposal they ever want.
I mean, we are in the North Brooklyn branch, so I'm probably getting a skewed perception of it. But as far as I know,
maybe not.
I think it's, from my understanding, South Brooklyn, other branches are far less. I mean, North Brooklyn, Central Brooklyn are much more creative class than other branches, from what I understand as an ignorant person.
All right. Well, imagine one of us coming onto a job site like, hey, I'm here to do heavy construction and also talk about socialism with you. Like, I just don't see that working terribly well. I mean, we should be getting jobs because we need them, right? Everybody needs a job. And like, I guess if there's like some sort of group formed to help people who need jobs get jobs, good union jobs, then that's good. Like, everybody needs jobs, right? We're all casting about for how we should be making a living in this late capitalist hell world.
I do work in heavy construction myself, so the idea of simply entering the trades purely out of political conviction in order to radicalize and start some sort of rank and file insurgency seems absurd for a couple of reasons. And the first is that it will not work. There is a relatively conservative old guard of rank and file folks who aren't interested in politics in general, certainly are not ready to have a bunch of socialist agitators up in there on the job site when mostly you're just trying to get work done.
Are you telling me you're not out as a Marxist at work, babe?
I am most certainly not out. In fact, I keep that pretty on the low for the time being until the social conditions are right for me to actually, start pushing things forward. Because that's the other part of it too, is that, as a union worker, let's say you're learning a trade, or you're a nurse, or you're a teacher. It takes a lot of skills and experience and practice and hard work in order to get to the point where you're effective at that job. So what are you going to go through, like 3, 4, 5 years of school or training in order to get a rank and file union job? And then what? You're going to just radicalize people in the course of a couple of years and then drop out of it? Like, I think what you were saying, Jamie, is the right stance on it, which is, if you need a job, it makes sense to funnel people into union jobs or potentially help SALT, right? Or things of that sort. But what makes more sense than just kind of inserting these people from the outside into these existing bureaucratic, oftentimes conservative institutions would be to organize your own workplace.
Yeah, totally.
That people are already working in, already have the connections to. And just because, a lot of the union work that's left in the city is blue collar, whether it's sanitation, it's Teamsters, it's building trades. Media is also organizing, and white collar, pink collar, blue collar, doesn't matter. All workers should be organizing in order to not only get the benefits and the pay and the work rules and all that good stuff that come with unions, but also to build class power.
Yeah, I think part of the idea too is to try to expand our base into more of the working class, right? And I should also note that a lot of people in the DSA are very young, so maybe they don't really have a career yet, and they're sort of looking around for what road they should be going down in life. So
yeah, this is going to be kind of my point, is that as a youngster, when I was 17, 18, I would have loved to get a union job, but I just had no idea how, and if at that time the DSA had existed and had, and I'd known about it and had some sort of way to make a connection for me, like, that would have been great. And I think, I could see this as really great for YDS or something like that.
For clarification, that's Young Democratic Socialists?
Young Democratic Socialists.
Yeah, the kids are all right.
The kids are pretty great.
So perhaps, I'm not sure how old you are because I just met you. I don't even know who the hell you are. But presumably, if the DSA had been, maybe at the level that it's at now, or even larger, when you were a younger person, it could have provided that sort of resource, for you to understand what it took in order to get into a unionized field.
Hypothetically, if that was a resource that was being provided by the DSA.
So that, I think, is something that, is worth working towards for you folks as an organization. But that's far different from just trying to kind of helicopter airdrop people into, like, sanitation or whatever the case may be.
I'm picturing one of our, media working group comrades, like, hi, I'm a web designer. I want a job on this construction site. Also, I'm a socialist.
It's like the opposite of the coal miners learning how to code. It's the programmers learning how to coal mine,
Totally.
Oh, that's good. That's a really good analogy.
But, that's one of the interesting things about all the amendments and resolutions is that, they're so open to interpretation, and there's so many different, as soon as you start talking about them, there's so many different ways that you could see it playing out. And that was a really complex thing for me at the Constitution, is a lot of things that I thought, maybe were a clear and obvious yes to me. When I heard the debate, it opened it up, and I started thinking more about the unintended consequences.
Yeah, totally. Like, there were a few things that I felt that way about as well. I was pretty sure that I knew what I was going to vote, and then I would hear somebody say something about it, and I was like, oh, that's a great fucking point.
Just to get back to the rank and file thing, I want to make myself clear. I think I talked shit on it, right, as a proposal, and I guess it passed, so we'll see how the whole thing pans out. But I think the positive thing about it is that it does show a great and growing orientation towards grassroots organizing within not just the working class, but also trade unions, which is where a socialist organization has to be going, always, is to the base.
Yeah, totally. So another resolution that was probably, I would say, the most lit of the day was one concerning Bernie Sanders.
The discourse was lit.
One might even say lit AF. Yeah.
Lit in what way? Like people were trying to light each other on fire with Molotovs, or like fun?
Not
and-
literally, but
Yes.
there was some tough talk.
Did you burn down Judson Memorial Church? God damn you people! I was going to anarchist book fairs there 15 years ago.
God, that would be just like us, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you adventurous scum.
Fucking firebugs,
Ultra
all
left.
of us.
DSA, very well known throughout the years for its radical, violent interventions.
Fieriness, exactly.
You are Antifa super soldier.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to name any names, but there were definitely some accusations of bad faith bandied about.
Ultra left is the term that I've seen.
Yeah,
Ooh.
someone referred to the critics as bad faith ultra left,
Damn.
which
Them's
perhaps
fighting
should be
words.
the new name of our show. Come to think of it.
Yeah, if Antifada doesn't pan out, that sounds good.
If we ever have to change our name for any reason, keep that one in the bank. But no, so there was a resolution floated that was ostensibly designed to just make us figure out what we wanted our relationship to be to the Bernie Sanders campaign before he announced. And he hasn't announced yet, but we're all pretty sure that he will. But the way it was written, it really read like a soft endorsement. Like the last line was something like, "We enthusiastically call upon Bernie Sanders to run for president." And like,
That's the worst part. Come on.
yeah, come on,
You're
man.
30,000, what is it, 40,000 people now? Something
Yeah,
around
something
that?
like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the enthusiastic, endorsement of the DSA right now is going to be like, Bernie's going to be like, well, I was going to retire. I was going to go live on a farm in Vermont and grow llamas. But instead, I guess I'll run for president and institute full communism for the DSA.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, I agreed with a lot of things that people were saying. Like, I think by campaigning for Bernie and forming a relationship with the Bernie Sanders campaign, we could get him to work with us on a number of issues that we care about, and we could interact with people and grow our base among people who might not have otherwise known about us. I know a lot of people got involved in the DSA post 2016. I think we have one sitting right here.
That's me.
And you know what? Come to think of it, so did I. So
There you go.
there we go. But we as an organization, the amendment floated by one old head notwithstanding, we do sit substantially to the left of Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And as such, we shouldn't be so thirsty for his approval. Like, we should let him come to us. And I got up and I said this. This is what I said. I think we should withhold our endorsement and our material aid for the same reason that he withheld his endorsement from Hillary. And that is to extract concessions.
That's right.
Because there are some positions he has that are very problematic for us as socialists and even just humanists, like
Israel, perhaps?
Israel, foreign policy, FOSTA, CESTA.
Ugh, God.
Like, people are literally going to die because of FOSTA and CESTA. People already have died because of U.S. foreign policy. These are not tiny points of disagreement here. So I would hope that socialists wouldn't be quite so thirsty to slob on his knob that they can't hold out a little bit longer in exchange for some real shit.
And we all know he's going to run. I mean, this,
It's pretty clear at this point. yeah.
That's what all the people who I assume are smart about things say, is that he's going to run. So why enthusiastically support? It doesn't make it just for optics alone. Like, the idea that we prepare for Bernie, obviously we should do that. But like, do we need to enthusiastically endorse before? No. Do we need a resolution to prepare?
Yeah,
That makes a lot more sense, a resolution to prepare, because then you actually have a street game, for when, the electoral carnival that we have every 4 years or so begins.
Nobody's planning on not thinking about it.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, I was just going to go home and not think about it indefinitely.
Oh no, I'm being way spicier than I thought I was going to be. This is too late.
No, that's great, man. We love these.
You
late
came
takes.
here after the bar. See, that's what,
Well,
I think a lot of the many of the people arguing in favor of the Bernie resolution made excellent points. And in fact, there was a sex worker who was arguing in favor of the resolution and spoke about
She wants a seat at the table.
yeah, and I mean, and she she made some good points.
Yeah, I think most of us agreed on ideology. It was just a disagreement on tactics for the most part.
That's a good spot to be in as an organization, honestly, especially one that's grown so fast. Is if you're not having huge debates about what the ultimate strategy or the vision is, it's merely over tactical issues. Then it's like I said with the working class, with the rank and file thing. It shows a move in a good direction. Whether that's a good tactic or not, the strategy remains that we want to build a base, a larger, more diverse base within the working class. So.
Yeah, totally.
All good stuff.
There were really only a few people who were at all condescending to the idea of real socialism and wanting to end capitalism. So, in case anyone didn't know that about the DSA, we are actual socialists.
Especially, it sounds like the New York City branch and the East Bay branch, too, apparently is pretty radical as well. I'm not sure how it is elsewhere in the country, but...
The East Bay branch is supposed to be particularly radical?
Yeah, that's what I heard, yeah. There's I think a pretty large communist caucus out there.
That's Antifa HQ.
Yeah, I got a lot of comrades out there in Oakland and the Bay in general, and they throw the fuck down out there, man. They don't fuck around. They were the ones that actually got solidarity from the longshoremen when they were doing their protests, 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, I'm from San Francisco, so shout out to San Francisco DSA.
This is great, having somebody we never met on before and we barely know, is that we learn new things about you like every 2 or 3 minutes on the pod. That's great.
Literally everything I say is learning a new thing about me.
That is true. That is true.
I made a video called Bernie Would Have Won last year, like right after the election, where I put the song Girls Just Want to Have Fun and wrote lyrics called Bernie Would Have Won.
Jamie, cue the karaoke version of that track. He's going to sing it for us live in studio.
You shouldn't put that in the podcast, but I just wanted to tell you.
Oh, no. No, you have to sing for your supper, all right? You said, we'll podcast for food. Our podcast includes karaoke on every episode. So 1, 2, 3. Just kidding. We wouldn't do that to you.
I would need a rehearsal.
Maybe next time.
I need a better mic. I need makeup.
You got a great face for radio, man. Come on.
So speaking of faces and their varying degrees of greatness, I think this is a good segue into talking about the incel rebellion. You want to tell them about it, babe?
The incel rebellion. Well, we're going to get pretty deep into incels. Our last 2 episodes, I got to say, were pretty theory heavy. We didn't get too many complaints, but... some folks said that all this Marxist theory went a little over their heads. So we're going to get down deep and dirty into the darkest reaches of the internet. And we are going to talk about a group of disaffected young men who now twice, I guess, in the last couple of years have killed people over not getting laid.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Toronto, there was recently on the 23rd a attack by a self-proclaimed involuntary celibate. He ran a van into a crowd of people and killed 10 and injured many, many more. Obviously, a absolutely horrific attack. So go ahead and play the audio on that.
20 horrific minutes for a van speeding along a sidewalk to hit, injure, and kill many pedestrians in a crowded part of Toronto. During a brief appearance in court, 25-year-old Alec Manassian was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder, 13 of attempted murder. Without speculating about motive, police say they've seized a cell phone and are looking into social media posts that appear to warn about a pending attack.
As has been reported in the media, the accused is alleged to have posted a cryptic message on Facebook minutes before he began driving the rented van, and he drove it southbound on Yonge Street and onto the crowded sidewalks.
Media reports say this post, now taken down by Facebook, referred to an online group called incel, or involuntary celibacy, where members revile women who they say refuse to have relationships with them. The post also praises someone with similar views who killed 6 in California in 2014.
Probably security services in Canada and elsewhere will be subcontracting people to go out and do some research on a movement like the incel movement to see if this is a one-off or if we're dealing with a rising crescendo of individuals sounding this call to rebellion against society for this issue.
Yeah, so that report from Al Jazeera came out, I think, soon after the actual attack itself. I find it notable that the police representative, whoever that nerdy guy was in the video, said that the guy put a cryptic message on his Facebook page. That shows, again, how divorced this whole incel manosphere faction of bizarre, angry, weird nerds on the internet is that it's considered cryptic to talk about 4chan.
Well, to most people it is.
Exactly,
Normal people don't know about this.
Right, which is why, like you said before, it's incredible to see this popping up in the media right now.
God.
I
never thought I was going to have to explain insults to my mom.
Oh,
but,
God.
you know, life comes at you fast.
My grandmother's going to start calling me and being like, do you know about the incels?
Oh, God.
Grandma doesn't need to know. But I think the other interesting thing that they did, too, is the guy said group called incels. And for me, that was kind of similar to how people talk about Antifa, you know?
Yeah.
I almost said Antifada. Antifa, you know, as though it's this sort of organized, centralized group, you know.
The president of Antifa.
Yeah, right.
Official
Soros.
Antifa.
Yeah, Soros money and, you know, like a strict hierarchy of command. So, again, it shows how far the media is and normies, as they say, are from understanding what these psychos are all about.
I also find it telling that President Trump didn't say shit about it. I mean, this last one happened in Canada, but, I mean, he is their king, really.
He is, yeah.
Because that's what they want. They don't want a two-sided relationship that takes work with another human being. They want to have power over a woman. They want to own her as their possession.
Well, on that, the last thing that Homeboy said before he killed those people in Toronto in his little Facebook message was, "All hail Supreme Gentleman Elliot Rodger." And as we'll see in these in this clip, he hits on a lot of the notes you were talking about, Jamie.
Yeah. Oh, and not for nothing. If this had been a Muslim, can you even imagine what Trump would be saying and doing right now? Like, if they were going to have a proportional response, they would be locking down every 20-sided die store in the country. Instead, it's like, oh, well, yeah, guy's gonna guy. I'm not saying that they should do that. They shouldn't do that to anyone. But
Exactly,
if they were going to treat these guys the same way they treat Muslims, then, yeah.
Well, we'll get into that about, the comparison between this and other sorts of terrorism. Let's go ahead and play the clip.
For the last 8 years of my life, ever since I've hit puberty, I've been forced to endure an existence of loneliness, rejection, and unfulfilled desires, all because girls have never been attracted to me.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, I know.
It gets worse.
I don't know what you don't see in me. I'm the perfect guy. And yet you throw yourselves at all these obnoxious men instead of me, supreme gentleman.
All right. Well,
Okay, you follow all these all these obnoxious men instead of me is like the best line ever. You
This
can't
is-
write that shit.
Yo, he straight up is like the whole incel idea that we're gonna unpack is in all this shit. This is why I found all these different like perfect clips.
That's an
Before-
amazing.
Okay, before we go any further, I want both of you to check your Chad privilege.
Okay.
Because, I know you, babe. You've never had any problems relating with the opposite sex. And I don't know you. I don't want to objectify our guest. And for all I know, you could be a huge fucking virgin. But, like, to all outward appearances, this guy fucks.
He smashes. Any comment on that, new friend?
Check your privilege.
That's one thing our new friend won't tell us about. Okay. Just like a typical Chad. Actually, no, aren't like Chads, they brag about all their sex. That's what the incels like complain about and shit.
Do they?
Yeah, that's
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, maybe he's just a regular ass dude. Who knows?
So
Who knows?
So incel. So the Chad's like an alpha.
Well, we're gonna not do comment in between. We're gonna hit all these. Yeah, and then we're gonna go back.
We're keeping that part.
Oh yeah.
Finally see that I am, in truth, the superior one. The true alpha male.
You just wanted that little
laugh,
evil
the
laugh
laugh.
in there in the
Yeah.
end. Yeah, that's important.
I'll be a god, exacting my retribution, and all those who deserve it. And you do deserve it, just for the crime of living a better life than me. All you popular kids, you've never accepted me, and now you'll all pay for it. And girls, All I've ever wanted was to love you and to be loved by you. I've wanted a girlfriend. I've wanted sex. I've wanted love, affection, adoration. But you think I'm unworthy of it. I hate all of you. Humanity is a disgusting, wretched, depraved species. If I had it in my power, I would stop at nothing to reduce every single one of you to mountains of skulls and rivers of blood.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And rightfully so.
And rightfully so.
You deserve to be annihilated.
That's it. He touches on, I think, a lot of the themes we want to get at with this incel conversation. He talks about his loneliness and his rejection. He talks about his hatred not only of women in general, but also the men that are able to attain, the sex that he has never had as a virgin. He also, and I think we're going to tease this out later, talks about love and affection, as though, that were those were his motivating desires. And he expresses this at the end with a very dark vision of just hatred of humanity. What do you say? Like piles of skulls and rivers of blood.
Jesus Christ.
My God.
I mean, yeah, who wouldn't want to date a guy like that?
Seriously.
That's the great irony about the nice guy, quote unquote, right?
The supreme gentleman.
He's like, oh, you women won't date me, but I'm such a nice guy. You fucking whore.
Right.
Like, I don't know how nice that guy is, actually.
And well, there's this whole idea that the intention of being nice or wanting love somehow translates into being a good partner.
Right.
When what that requires is an enormous amount of work and conscious effort. And I think this is something that even men who aren't like terrible, like don't really understand, is how much like dating and relationships are like work, and something that like I'm amazed by how like little effort men put into the process of dating. Like Tinder is like the hardest fucking thing they've ever done, or even Tinder and OkCupid having to write a whole profile, like that's the hardest thing you've ever done to try to like date somebody, when it's like the amount of effort that women on average put into dating is like, come on.
There are entire periodicals aimed at helping women make themselves more appealing partners in various ways.
Right. And this again, to broaden things out once more, this incel phenomenon is part of a much larger phenomenon. Maybe the umbrella of this whole thing would be the manosphere, as they call it.
Oh,
our more millennial, advanced, extreme online people, fans will know a lot about that. But the manosphere really, is a whole spectrum of people who are frustrated not only with their own sex lives, but just alienated from society, it seems, in general, unable to do, as you said, Andrew, to put the work into not only making themselves better, as better partners, but also, contributing anything to society besides shit posting rape jokes on Reddit.
I would say that the effort with regards to dating is probably across party lines there. I think probably most leftist men have the same... but not to say that it's obviously the manosphere much worse. That's a whole ideology.
Dude, I like to think I'm pretty cool, and a lot of people would like to date me, but
I did.
In the environment of North Brooklyn in the aughts, man, when I met Sean, he had no idea how low the bar had been set by those who came before. Oh my God, he didn't need to do half the stuff he did to get me to like him.
And this was many years ago, too. This was before, I think, Tinder, right? And OkCupid and everything?
Pre-Tinder. Oh, we're so old, babe.
PT. That's how we're going to tell time from now on.
And what you're saying is that overall leftist men...
I mean, I wasn't really a leftist at this point in time. I was a very progressive person, but also not terribly engaged in politics. I was more interested in, like, after-hours parties and having mediocre sex with fuckboys, and all that good stuff. And all that very worthwhile stuff you do in your 20s.
And yeah, I think that's good because it grounds us in another topic that I want to talk about, which is the general sort of, like technological and alienated weirdness of this internet dating phenomenon, and also representations of what dating and sex and affection is supposed to be that we're given, in pop culture and everything like that. I think that the society sets up this very libertine sort of possibility for human beings, young men, right? With the pornography and, like the easy sex that you see all over the place on the internet and on TV. But real life is not actually like that. In fact, setting up a Tinder profile in a dark basement by yourself or reading a self-help guide on how to do it is actually kind of fucking depressing.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's fine. People have always dated in a variety of ways, and there are plenty of people who are able to use Tinder and be normal about it. I never did online. Well, I tried online dating. It never really worked for me. But, I'm sure it definitely works for some people. I mean, technology is only a small part of it. I think most of the alienation comes from, shall we say, dare I say, capitalism.
Yes.
Hell yeah. I'm
let's,
pretty pro app. So capitalism is the real problem.
Yeah, technology is only as good as the hands that it's in.
Well,
Or
Totally.
bad.
Let's talk a little historical materialism then, shall we?
Wait, can I just jump in?
No, historical materialism time. No, of course, jump in.
Just talking about misogyny and technology. Have you guys heard of deepfakes?
No.
No.
Do tell.
So this is a segment that we worked on our podcast.
Another plug,
on
another plug.
the theory
Go
of
on.
everything, Benjamin Walker's theory of everything, where we talked to deepfakes is an AI technology that was designed by a Reddit user that will basically create a 3D model of somebody's face based on tons of images, and it can map it onto somebody else's face.
They insert it into porn.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah,
What?
And so
I
it's
heard
this
about
whole subreddit community that was taking actresses, and where it gets really disturbing is just random people. This could be like a high school girl,
Oh,
and put
Jesus
her
Christ.
face on a porn clip, right?
That is supposed to happen in your imagination, guys. Let's not legitimize it by putting it in pixels.
Totally.
Again,
But
go on.
I was just going to say, for our segment, people talk about this as disturbing, mostly in the media that we saw from a perspective of, oh no, like fake news. Like there'll be more fake news if we're faking video clips. But we have to look at where the technology originated, and where the technology
what drives
originated was
technology always, guys?
insanely disturbing ideological misogyny, like specifically about attacking women. And I mean, and
I'm not
that's
sure
that's
that
the origin
that's,
of Facebook too. Fucking face smash.
Yeah, they wanted
Like,
to
when-
check out which girls were hot at their college.
All right, I'll
You gotta
concede
look
that.
at
I was
how-
going to push back, but I'll concede
It was
that.
named after the freshman Facebook. For those who aren't fucking coastal elites, I feel like they don't necessarily know this, but the Facebook was a literal book that we had at Ivy League schools and perhaps other schools too. The freshman Facebook.
I never heard of it.
Okay, so the freshman Facebook was exactly what it sounds like. It was a book of all the faces of all the freshmen, and people, mostly dudes, would look through it for like which freshmen they wanted to bang. And I actually met some people that way when I was a freshman in college.
Wow.
They
Big
saw
reveal.
these dudes, I think they were seniors. They lived off campus. They were so cool. They saw me in the freshman Facebook and then looked me up in the directory and called me on my fucking dorm phone and invited me over. And I went because I was a loser and I didn't know anybody.
My comment was about the first app that Mark Zuckerberg made was literally like a hot or not app that was for rating women. As Facebook functioned.
Before Facebook.
But right,
Oh, okay.
right before Facebook, he made a hot or not app.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the literal book.
Oh no.
Imagine like working really hard and getting into Harvard, and then like that's what people do to you there. Like, oh, still a woman, still gonna be objectified no matter what. Cool.
Let me try to defend my position that things are different now with the internet. Now, I concede the point that technology is neutral in a sense. These are tools and it's how we use them, right? But I think to get to a historical materialist analysis, right? The ways that the way that capitalism develops, and I think somebody called it almost this acid of social bonds, right?
Yeah.
It's constantly reinventing itself, and it's constantly changing the social relations that exist. I think that right now, a particularly pernicious form of the internet has arisen, and we saw this in the with the Cambridge Analytica stuff, right? But I think we also see this too, just in these spheres of the internet that you could fall into. And thankfully, like I said, I'm old enough that I never fell into them when I was a kid, because who the fuck knows what I would have done. Where
Amen.
To be fair, the internet was not invented yet when you were a kid.
No, you're right.
I'll say I'm 28. I was born in 1990, and when I was like probably 14, 15, I like totally read like pickup artist stuff.
Oh no.
See, I would have had no access to that whatsoever.
Yeah,
like,
fair enough.
Here's one example, right? Like, when we're young, we all have to discover, what sex is, what it entails. We have to understand what genitalia are. We have to understand that things go from soft to hard and from dry to wet and all that good stuff. When you were... I sound like such a fucking old man right now. But when I was a kid, I remember being in a friend's closet because we were having the talk. He was going to tell me all about sex.
In the closet?
Yeah, in a dark closet. Well, it was very...
When'd you come out of that closet?
I'm still in the closet. Just kidding. No, so this kid, we went into this closet. He was like, I'm going to tell you about sex. Go in the closet.
Nice.
And he told me that...
this is so hot. Keep going.
Yeah, he said that the man's penis gets really hard. I was like, oh, that's weird. He's like, and then they stick it in the woman. And I'm like, where? And they told me. I was like, wow. And then...
Were you like, no, that couldn't possibly be right?
I mean,
that's what I said.
I was on the edge of my seat. And then the way he described it, it made it seem like it lasted for days. Like the guy just left it in there. Like I don't think he understood the whole process of how it starts and finishes.
Oh my God.
And so I just assumed that for a few days you just left it in there. And then he said that when you pull it out, it has fungus and mushrooms on it.
What?
So I don't know where this was a young kid. I don't know where he came up with this shit. But the point is that that's
Sometimes I do.
the way that we discovered sex was when we were in the 80s and 90s.
Through the Whisper Network.
It was the telephone game.
Word of mouth.
Who knows what the fuck
Operator.
other people heard.
I asked my friend, I was like, do you think, so women's, there's different, right? It's just just they don't have balls? He was like, yeah, I think that's it. I think it's the testicle, so I have no fucking idea.
That's very gender essentialist of him, but it wasn't woke yet.
I'm really going to date myself here, but I think I learned about sex from the movie Father of the Bride.
Oh, wow.
Featuring Steve Martin.
Steve Martin.
Yeah, I was at a sleepover. I think I was 7 or 8 maybe. And my worldly friend Rachel was like, hey, if you want to watch this movie, you need to know what a condom is. And I was like, what's a condom? And she's like, it's something a man puts on for sex. And I was like, what's sex? And she told me, and I was like, what? I guess there's a reference to a condom in the movie.
Well, let's contrast that again with today with hardcore pornography, because I think you're right, Andrew, to say that sex does drive a lot of commerce in general, and certainly it drives a lot of the innovation on the internet. So Pornhub is by far the biggest site on the internet. I think that when we were kids and we'd go and we'd go to the special store where you could buy the Hustler magazines in the black bags, and then we'd all share it. We'd pass it around, and then, we would hide pornos in the woods, and
the woods?
Yeah, you dig a hole, and then you go and you pull out the pornos and look at them.
Wow, we grew up in two different places.
This was very fucking analog now. And I guess the point of this whole thing is that these incels, right? These young men, let's define it. These young men who are very, very seriously alienated. They probably have mental issues to begin with, but there's also a whole background to this that is social, and it's cultural, and it's economic. They are bombarded from the time that they're, able to access the internet with a real knowledge of what sex is, and also a very stylized and idealized version of what sex is. This rock hard, porn stud, just pounding, pile driving a, absolutely perfectly, fit and, I don't know, lascivious young porn actress. I almost said porn star.
Adult performer. Thank you.
But you get my point, right? Nowadays I feel like it's so out there that these kids feel like they're missing on something that's real, but it's not really real.
Yeah,
for most
they
people.
also feel like they're entitled to it. And I don't want to give porn too much credit here. Like, I think porn is more a reflection of society or a trailing indicator than an influence on society. But I'm sure there's a bit of a feedback effect.
I don't want to make that my whole point. It's a larger point about the internet where, like, instead of us going into the woods and sharing like the Penthouse magazine, you have forums on the internet where kids, young men and women too, who are disaffected, can now for the first time come together and commiserate with each other and organize with each other, really. Like, the same tool that helped to create Occupy Wall Street and the Arab Spring can also help create Elliot Rodgers and the Supreme Gentleman
It's
incel.
a real double-edged sword.
It is. And it's, again, a reflection of the society we live in and the conditions we live in.
I'm going to pop in here as the resident youngster growing up with the internet.
Aw, he's a baby.
So cute.
I found porn on like LimeWire.
Oh, I have LimeWire.
When I was like very, very young. And before that, like I watched like hours and hours of MTV as like 8, 9, 10 years old, like in the height of like spring break wet T-shirt contest.
Oh, I
Did you ever watch
era.
HBO Real Sex?
We did
Is
not
that
have
before
HBO.
your time?
Did you have USA's Up All Night?
No, I did not have that either.
What
That
about
was a so-
MTV's Undressed? It was like porn without the sex parts.
That sounds terrible.
Did you
Yeah,
find
it
Did you find
was.
one of your relatives' floppy disks that was marked like files and put it into a computer and wait 3 minutes for a pixelated image of like some naked woman to arrive?
Sounds
None
like
of
you
the
did.
relatives had any idea how to use a floppy disk.
All right. That's some late 80s shit. Floppy disks, I'm also dating myself again.
Oh my God.
Blow into the
I had to
Nintendo
use a
charger.
floppy disk. But the point is, like, I do think that had like very negative effects on me and my relationship with sex as like a high school student. I think as a 7th and 8th grader, having so much. I went to an all boys K through 8. Which was like also very bad, but so it's like a bunch of dudes like all like sharing porn that we downloaded from LimeWire. It's like insane. Like obviously we all like all boys until 8th grade, and then you go into freshman year of high school and you've just been like watching porn, like not interacting with any girls, like loading yourself up like a spring shot. It's kind of nuts.
Oh, man.
And I think porn is a great thing, and I fucking think it like totally should exist.
But, or is there no but?
There's the but. I think
it.
I think for the children, and I think the way it is right now, and the fact that like at least with like my generation of parents, I don't know about people who are parents now, like the inability to like talk about sex in that direct of a way. Like when my mom caught me watching porn on the computer, she like yelled at me and was like, "How would you feel if that was your sister?" And I was like, that's a very weird thing to say to a child with a boner,
Mom just going right in with the incest taboo. She knows how to get you in your deep psychology. So now we know also, Andrew, too, a bit about your family life. So how was your relationship with your sister? No, I'm just
nothing
kidding.
sexual.
Don't say it.
Aw, we're
I'm
really,
sorry,
we're
I'm
really
sorry.
getting down to it. That's what we like to do with the Antifada. We're not much for small talk.
Yeah.
Thinking about technology and sex, and I am a big believer that it's like something like deep fakes. It's not just an advanced version of Photoshop. Like as technology improves, like technologies have political ideology behind them, I believe. Or have or lean more towards or enable certain political ideologies more. For instance, like Bitcoin,
Yes.
and blockchain. In my mind, is an inherently right-wing technology.
Yes.
Like the
Fetishization. It's hard.
Okay, we'll say it for you.
the fetishization.
There you go. You got it.
Nailed it.
The fetishization of decentralization, as a right wing, I don't really have anywhere like super intelligent that this is going, but like, yeah.
It is a good point, though.
Technology, like it's presented as this objective good or at least neutral thing, but it was created by a certain class of people that doesn't think of themselves as privileged, but they are, and they're obviously motivated by all sorts of shit, and they're creating that for people like them.
Let's ground this again, back in our subject matter. Sorry to be the taskmaster here, which is
by all means.
that Pornhub was not created because people wanted to get 11-year-olds hooked on hardcore pornography. Facebook was not created in order to make sure that your aunts and uncles can post some really awkward shit on your timeline, embarrassed about. What they were created for was for profit, right?
Cha-ching.
And so
Yes.
ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that there is a political element to things like Bitcoin, because I think fucking with monetary stuff is a right populist thing, sometimes left populist, but mostly right populist thing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think that YouTube gives a flying fuck that almost all of the comments on that fucking page are
cesspool.
angry white kids who are super right-wing, troll, fucking racist, misogynist pieces of shit. The fucking clicks are coming in. They don't fucking care.
And
I mean,
then it comes down to regulate the refusal to regulate fucking anything down to Twitter, and that's why all the technology, even if it's neutral, will end up leaning right. Mm-hmm. And when it goes unregulated, as we tend to with new technology,
if you have a profit system, it will end up leaning right because the right is more defensive capital, than say the center left, which are Democrats, and certainly. There is no socialized or collective internet that we can access as leftists, that would provide a way for us to communicate without stealing our data or showing us shitty advertisements that we don't want to see. The whole infrastructure is there to make profits. And that does, as you say, lead to, certain ideological ramifications.
Yeah, if you're a right-wing libertarian in this day and age, or any really, it just means you believe in private tyranny. Like, what's making most people unfree in their day-to-day lives? Is it the government? No, it's their fucking jobs. And
That's right.
People forget about that when they're privileged, but that's true.
Well, let's talk about jobs, too, because I think that, you can't look at this incel phenomenon, right? And again, let's talk about what this is. I'm not saying blanket that it's all white men.
It's mostly white men.
It's mostly white men. It's, everyone from, say, like high school students up to maybe people like 30 or so,
Yeah.
And it's people who are, I think part of what, Andrew, you said before, this kind of downwardly mobile, middle class that's falling into a,
they're losing
labor
their
market.
Privileges.
A labor market that's not what it used to be.
And when you've always been super privileged in society and you start to lose that status a little bit, like pretty much anything feels like horrific oppression to you.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it historically over the last 40, 50 years, what the racial justice movement has done, and certainly what the women's movement has done, is not just make little gains, against patriarchal power, but make real and serious gains against it, right? So if you're already aggrieved, you already feel like you're downwardly mobile, you don't have many prospects, you might live in your parents' basement, right? You could blame, I don't know, capitalism, you could blame this, that, and the other thing.
Well, some
but
of these people are rich kids, so let's be real here.
Well,
Elliot Rodger, not underprivileged.
I think most of them are not Elliot Rodgerses, right? They are not, super privileged kids. But even if those kids do exist and they're part of this whole thing, this trailing indicator, right, of gender relations does, again, come from a crisis in the social relationships that are developed by capitalism. Conservatives are constantly talking about, traditional marriage and things of that sort, when the biggest, how shall I say, the biggest battering ram against the nuclear family is capitalism, forcing,
It dissolves social bonds of all kinds. And it's not unique to working class people. I mean, we're all atomized and alienated in front of various screens. And, it might not manifest as being an incel, but it's certainly a factor.
Wait, okay. You were just saying capitalism is hurting the nuclear family bond.
Capitalism, to go back historically, actually, and I think this is important to talk about, capitalism in its infancy actually creates this conception of the family, and I think we spoke about this on another episode, the family as having a male breadwinner, and then having a woman who is engaged in social reproductive activities, which is to say all the things that allow the man to go back to work, be healthy and fed and sheltered and all that, but also to, keep the house in order, and also to, of course, raise the next generation of workers moving forward. So in the late 19th century, this becomes this sort of ideal. It becomes justified ex post facto for a rising middle class in the United States and elsewhere. Now, that whole conception is divorced from what came before it, which was for almost all of human history, the family unit was also an economic unit, right? If you're on a small farm, there was a division of labor, sure, gendered, right? But the mother was out in the fields as soon as the kids could were old enough to go out and, swing a scythe or whatever it is, they were working. If you were a small artisan, that your kids were apprenticing at 9 years old and your wife was selling the wares out of the front. So the household unit was not this market-driven sort of, it didn't have these market-driven external pressures upon it. It was its own sort of internal firm, right? So what happens is that capitalism, because it brings more and more people into the cash nexus, into the market economy, it pulls the breadwinner out from the family. But while it does that, ideologically, the female is now changed from a economic producer within the home to a nurturing, virtuistic mother figure, right? Who takes care of the family and protects the dad and the kids from market forces, right? Protects them from, everything that's happening in the outside world. And that only becomes democratized in the United States. And of course, that's the whole ideal of the 50s dad, right? That only becomes democratized in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s because...
For some people.
Well, for many working class people, for the majority, I think it's in 1953 that for the first time, the majority of families had only one source of income from a male breadwinner.
For white people.
Yeah, yes, of course, there are racial distinctions here, right? The point is not to say that there aren't exceptions and there wasn't racism and that it was a good system, right? The point is to say that innovations and structures within capitalism basically created the conditions for this to exist, and then also after that, people created an ideology that said that this is the way that things are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And these people are trying to look back to the 1950s as though it were always there instead of just an aberration.
Yeah, that's why it's so fucking ridiculous when people like Jordan Peterson say that men and women have only been working together for 40 years.
Yeah, that's fucking bullshit.
It's an experiment. It's not working.
Try 100,000.
Like, you have no concept of history whatsoever, dude.
And in going back to like tribal societies, where the family unit was like far more de-emphasized, in small tribes, because it was the competition aspect was not with your neighbors, so just when you initially said, that capitalism, is is kind of the battering ram against the nuclear family, I immediately jumped to like tribalism, thinking about how capitalism reinforces the nuclear family because your family is competing against every other motherfucking family on your goddamn block, for the scraps.
Yeah, no, I should clarify actually. It's not this battering ram against the family per se. It's a battering ram against all well-worn traditions, right?
And all human relationships.
And all human relationships that exist. So it can create this idealized 50s dad version of the nuclear family. But when, in the 1960s and 1970s, women, A, forced themselves into the workplace, and B, capital needs more labor and cheaper labor, right? There's no structural reason why that same nuclear family cannot be dissolved by having both the male and the female within, the traditional nuclear family, both working 40, 50, 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
And that's capital's want. It's not what people wanted per se. This is what the system demanded of them.
I mean, it's definitely good that women have more choices now, but it also sucks because capitalism uses everything we like against us. And it created what Nancy Fraser refers to as a crisis of care that has yet to be resolved. Like, somebody has to do the work of social reproduction, and it's usually still women. So they're caught in this impossible bind where you can be like a half good mother and half good at your career, but you can't be both. And, you know, the way that we're solving that problem right now is well-off women are outsourcing their domestic labor to women from poorer parts of the world, but it's really just passing the buck down the line. And, you know, if capitalism were to do what it claims it can do and bring everyone up to this standard of living, there would cease to be human beings because, like, someone has to do that social reproductive work, you know?
Robots.
And, like, you can see it in Japan is sort of an alternate vision of this future because they have almost no immigration and their birth rate is negative at this point in time.
That's right.
So, like, we need more people, we need more workers, and this is one of the great internal contradictions of capitalism because the more you squeeze people, like, and they just view social reproductive labor and child rearing as this infinite free gift. But it's not. Like, birth rates are way down. They have not recovered that much since the Great Recession. And I really don't see it getting any better.
What capital's managed to do over the last 30, 40 years as this transformation has happened, you know, people call it neoliberalism from the Fordist era, is it's been able to monetize and commodify all sorts of care work, and also things as simple as, you know, the proliferation of fast food and restaurants and people eating out because they're so busy they don't have time to, like, have a home-cooked meal, right? I mean, that is literally taking something that was happening in the household, as you said, free female labor, not quite free because the male wage was actually included within what the woman and the children needed to reproduce themselves, right? But it's this deepening
and now that's not even
commodification.
Included anymore under
Right.
neoliberalism.
Which shows you how, despite all the, you know, celebration of innovation and capitalism and technology, right, we are not any farther ahead than we were in the 1960s or 70s, right?
No.
People are working more hours for less money. They're insecure. And to bring it back to these, you know, poor, I say poor and like sad, these like shitbag, sad, alienated, lonely kids, right? These are the kind of family environments that they're growing up in. And I'm no great defender of the bourgeois family. You know, I'd love to see it abolished, you know, along with many other sort of relations, right? But, you know, these kids do not have parents who are able to give that care work, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like we should talk a little bit about liberal feminism and their response to this whole incel thing, because I think, as usual, their analysis is correct but limited. It's correct but incomplete. Like, I saw a very good article in Harper's Bazaar by my friend Jennifer Wright, sort of breaking down the real shit that's going on with incels. That they hate women. They're a hate group. It's not really about loneliness, right? Because if it were about loneliness, they would be like planning fun meetups for them to like get
Right.
together and support each other. No, it's about hating
Or they would
women.
have some friends who are women, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps.
To be able to make eye contact with a woman.
Yeah, you know, they would just like practice their social skills. But no, it's about hating women and wanting power over them. And that's exemplified by who they think is an alpha and who they think is a beta, right?
Who's
'Cause
the most alpha man in the United States right now, do you think?
Donald fucking Trump.
Boom.
Like,
You heard it here first, folks.
like Jennifer said,
God
like
Emperor.
this is a disgusting, obese orange man whose wife physically recoils at his touch, but he's a real player because he owns her, you know? Whereas someone like John Legend, even though he's married to a supermodel, is a total cuck because, you know, he views her as a person.
He's a beta cuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that really does get to the heart of this whole thing, which is that, as you said, it's not about, oh, I'm so lonely. It's about this social alienation turned outwards into a very shallow, you know, ideology of this bizarre conception that women control everything in the world, right? That, like, you know, pussy is what gets, you know, everything done in this society.
From
It's
your
this-
mouth to God's ears, honey.
Right, I know. Like, it kind of what it does. I'm going to pause for a second because I'm going to stutter. I got a point on bourgeois feminism real quick.
Oh my god.
We're doing good, guys.
Good job.
Oh my God.
Good job, everyone.
Andrew,
I'm
you
just
doing
thinking about these fucking men's rights, motherfuckers.
Oh, you're going to
Oh, it
go
makes me
off.
so
man.
mad. Because
Dude,
I've
feel
talked
free to go off.
I've spent like time talking to these people like in person, on the internet. I don't know why. I know why. Because some of them are like I have like family, like cousins who are like deep into this shit.
Oh,
you know?
no.
Yeah. Ooh, it's some scary ass shit. It's some scary
And like, what do you do with those people? Like, the Amanda Marcotte analysis is sort of like, yeah, there are these ahistorical forces in, mostly white dudes, like racism and sexism. And all we can really do with it is just try to keep them out of power. But that's not really enough for me, because if you view it that way, then you really can't do anything about it. And we're all about doing things about it here at the Antifada.
So about bourgeois feminism, right? Which Jennifer Wright, an old colleague of yours, represents, and I think in a really good and smart way in her piece and in others, right? She comes from this position of liberal feminism. At heart of that conception and movement, which has done tremendous things for women, the tremendous gains have been made. As you said, nobody here wants to put women back in the kitchen, barefoot, right? But this kind of liberal feminism eventually runs up against a barrier. Yeah. Because it arrives out of this Enlightenment period, which is tied with the whole rise of capitalism, this conception of universal rights and universal equality. It's got these ebbs and flows. As early as the American Revolution and the French Revolution, you had very radical calls for women's emancipation, voting rights, and things of that sort. And then it kind of ebbs for a long time as, men take back control. You have the 20s with the flappers, those real, I don't know, lit-ass hoes.
Floozies.
Yeah, floozies. That's how they would call it back then.
Fun broads.
Yeah, some fun broads, some nice dimes, who kind of broke these sexual mores. You have the 40s where women go to work in the factories while the men are at war. Then they're pushed back in, to the household. You have the 60s and 70s, which of course was the huge, women's rights push that really got us the gains that we have today, right? But the problem with this sort of feminism, and Jamie, you're a socialist feminist, as I am, so perhaps you'd agree with me.
I would never waste my time with a man who wasn't.
Amen. This conception of formal equality, it reaches its limits when you get to the market, right?
Yeah.
Because this conception of, bourgeois feminism cannot deal with the fact that the market, especially the labor market, and the market in terms of things like social reproduction and things of that sort, cannot countenance an equality between people when it comes to wages. It cannot countenance an equality between people when it comes to their power on the shop floor.
And like the commodification of people is also a thing that they have yet to fully reckon with.
Yes.
Like, I mean, first of all, they understand that these guys hate women, but they don't really understand why they hate women. And they're like, oh, it's not my job to think about that. It's not my job to educate you. But I really do think we need to understand the material basis for this if we're going to do shit about it. And also, like, they really put sex in a special category. Like, they think that, sex is not a commodity and shouldn't be a commodity. A lot of these folks.
Yeah, tell Madison Avenue that.
Yeah. But, like, it is. Like, I've heard there's, like, this liberal feminist conception of what sex should be, which is not a commodity to be bought and sold on the market, not a thing that women have that men want. And I agree with that, but I also want to decommodify everybody's labor. Like, I want to go even further than that. Like, I'm not against sex work because it's somehow especially bad to sell your sexual labor for money. I'm against it because I'm against all work. And communists often use prostitution as a metaphor for all work because it's very evocative for people. But yeah, like it is a commodity. And I too want to decommodify that. And we've heard some people talking some weird talk about how sex should be redistributed.
Ooh, are you talking about douche hat?
Spread the wealth around. I might be. And
Ross
like,
douche
which
hat.
would obviously entail like turning women into sex slaves, basically. And I want to decommodify sex, but not because it's like a commons that everyone should have equal access to whenever they want.
Such a fucking psychopathic idea.
Yeah, like I want to decommodify it like I want to decommodify all labor because women, sex workers, laborers are human beings. And we have value inherent to that as human beings and not just as commodities on the market.
Hell yeah. And one thing I thought of when you said that too is that one of the ways that people were talking about dealing with this incel situation, right? Because unlike, say, a Muslim terrorist, who goes and, blows up a Shia mosque or, flies a plane into a tower, we're very concerned about these young white men in America who are alienated, right? And we want to know about all their reasons why they do the things, and we want to get to the heart of the matter, right? No, seriously, right? One of the ways that they've been talking about dealing with this crisis, is prostitution. Saying, oh, well, if we just had, sex work could be legalized, then this incel problem would go away. But I think we saw in the Elliot Rodger video, again, that it's not about sex. It's not about orgasming, and it's not even about human contact. They actually want affection in a way. They want to be loved in a way. They feel rejected. And the actual process of having sex isn't, I think, what really drives them.
No. If that were true, they would all just go to prostitutes.
Exactly.
But
which people used to do back in the day.
They want
that was
to
the solution.
Yeah, they want to be able to compel somebody to not just have sex with them, but love them or respect them. He uses the word adore.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, they really want to redistribute popularity.
Yeah.
Oof. Good luck with that. Well, I mean, that kind of comes to like one of the limits of what our horizon could be politically, right? Is that, even under the most egalitarian and equal system in the entire world with no exploitation, there are going to be some people who are more, socially adept than other people, and there are going to be some folks who are more loners and don't really.
Yeah, but don't you think it would be much, much better under socialism?
Well, empirically it is. They've done these studies, right?
That is true. I mean, all right, I brought this up on the Majority Report the other day. Someone was like, I need to convince my friend that socialism is good. What are your top 3 selling points? And I felt myself going on and on about, alienated labor and your surplus value. And then the third one, I'm like, all right, I need something spicy. Sex would be better under socialism. Boom. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah.
QED,
they've
bitches.
done studies. And then I was like, well, I mean, the only real concrete studies are that sex is better for women. Like, they actually polled women before and after the fall of the Soviet Union. Or was it in East and West?
I think it was East Germany.
It was East and West Berlin, I think.
I believe that was it.
And, like, the women living under
Andy.
socialism had more orgasms, which is a very easy way to quantify. I mean, it's not all that sex is about, but it's, like, pretty fucking great.
Well, let me just say too that there have been recent studies, and this is just contemporary American society. They've done studies about partnerships, marriages where there's children involved, where the male and the female, or the male and the male, or female and female within this marriage or partnership share the household duties and the child rearing, right? And what they've shown is that not only are they qualitatively happier, but we can also see that they're quantitatively happier because they have much more sex with each other when they're sharing the social reproductive duties.
You don't say.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the bad part of that is that only, apparently, according to this, 30% of couples in the study did do an equal share of childcare and household labor. But, 30% can grow, and, at least in the medium term, we can imagine that, men and women, or whoever's in a relationship with each other, can potentially, be happier and have better sex lives when they cooperate instead of compete or dominate one another.
Spoken like a true cock, Samantha.
I would just like to say that for me, a thing is, with the working hours that people work to the fucking bone, like, if you do not have the time to not be exhausted, you get home and you're already exhausted. You do not have the time for foreplay. You don't have the time for meaningful sex that is about, like, emotional connection. Right. I think if everybody's fucking exhausted from working all the time, the quality of sex decreases, because maybe it is just a race to orgasm, but while you still have the energy, maybe you're fucking exhausted as fuck, but feel some sort of social obligation because of all of the conditioning from media that we have. Oh, it's a wasted day if I don't fuck in it, like all these things, I think, go to that point. But I would also like to, I don't think misogyny is caused by capitalism. And I don't think a socialist or communist world would be inherently egalitarian or feminist.
Well, it plays a pretty big role, though. Like, Marx and Engels were trying to figure out where women's oppression came from, which I appreciate as a woman. And they traced it back to the beginning of private property.
Well, Jamie, on that point, I think it's a kind of a pushback about what you were saying. I agree that we're never going to create a perfect utopian world, but you had a little thing. Remember when that Roosh V guy did that?
Oh, yeah.
He tried to bang a country and failed.
So this guy, Roosh V, he's like a pickup artist, and he has written a bunch of guides to how to bang women in different countries. And then he went to Denmark, and all of a sudden, he was cockblocked by socialism. Because in a place where there's more equality between the sexes, all of a sudden, his bullshit tactics didn't work anymore. Because when women don't depend on men for survival, they have to, be charming and interesting and good at sex. So, sorry, dude.
Are you saying Roosh V isn't charming, interesting, and good at sex?
Perhaps. So, in the end, the book he wrote was called Don't Bang Denmark. Like, yeah, it's a bunch of fucking prudes. I don't even know what's... He actually admitted... Like, there's a good article about it in, I want to say, Dissent magazine,
Yeah, I
maybe?
think I remember that article.
Called, like, Cockblocked by Socialism, that broke it down. And he actually admits... He's like, yeah, maybe socialism is good for some people, and maybe it makes a lot of people's lives better, especially women, but I don't like it because, I can't get laid, so...
Well, Roosh V is the guy who wrote the pro-rape essay.
Oh, yeah.
If you recall this whole
he said
fucking
legalize
thing.
rape, yeah. This is
marital, just marital rape.
Oh, okay.
There's the manosphere for you, right? Where you can say those things and still have a following.
Oh, my God. I have another point that I wanted to get to.
I had one, too.
So after I said that thing on the show about how sex is better under socialism, at least for women... Someone was like, well, why would a man care about that? And I was like,
come on.
Oh, I don't know. Only a total fucking psychopath would want to fuck someone who doesn't want to fuck them back, right?
Maybe sex is more enjoyable as a two-sided experience. Maybe sex is more enjoyable if you're actually like communicating and interfacing with somebody and it's an exchange and not just fucking...
Not just like these
alcohol.
Wow, I hadn't pegged our guests for such a fucking...
We learn something new every minute.
Hold on, my alt-right Roosh V loving cousin.
I love how mad you're getting.
Cousin specifically told me I wasn't a cuck.
Oh, that's very nice of
He's
him.
like, I've never met a Bernie supporter who wasn't a cuck.
Wow.
Is that because you're like 6'2" and handsome with facial hair?
Yes.
How generous! How very generous of him.
Well,
but this. I mean, I'm assuming he's never going to listen to this because it's already an hour and
we have his number.
But like this is one of those, like, he's not an incel, but like this is one of those dudes who's clearly like, I do have Chad privilege, as you brought up, and this is something to be aware of, because for me it's very easy to say, like, just like respect women and they'll come to you and want to fuck you, like
That does get, I think what you're touching on is, and I hate to do it, but I want to throw these, not the manosphere, MGTOW people, men going their own way, not the real hardcore misogynists and women haters, but the people on the alt-right who are kind of the rank and file, who aren't completely gone, who aren't the basket of deplorables, who are super into white power and ethnic nationalism and all that. I think there are.
They're like, I just wanted tariffs.
Right? Yeah. They got cucked by the president, but I guess what I'm saying is that there is a hardcore of this incel, manosphere, PUA, men's rights movement that is unreachable. We should not be trying to, organize or get in touch with them. We should be trying to destroy them. Similar, again, politically to those folks who voted for the God Emperor, the Supreme Gentleman Donald Trump, who did it despite his racism, but not because of his racism. A lot of his economic populism appealed to them, even though they got sold a false bill of goods. I'm not defending what they did, but they are people who voted for Trump, who voted for Obama, 4 years ago. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to say that there is probably a pretty decent subsection of these incels who are passing through a phase, of alienation, and they're not lost. They're not Elliot Rodger. They're not going to go out and start shooting and killing people, right? And we need to understand where this loneliness and this alienation and this anger and this misogyny comes from, not only to understand the society and the economy that we live in, right? But also to try to imagine how to get out of that and make a better society, because we can't go one by one. I'm not going to go to Reddit and, start, a therapy session with these 13-year-olds in
it's
Omaha.
true, though. A lot of these people are lonely. They're lost. They're looking for something, community. Let me just preface this by saying, it's not only about how they're celibate, right? Like our friend Andrew was talking about earlier.
This is huge.
There are huge misogynists who do get laid, who have the exact same ideology.
All the red pill people have the same fucking beliefs as these incels. So the idea that it's them not getting laid, that is the birth of this ideology, is fucking absurd. Because all the people who are getting laid believe the same ass shit. It's just they're getting laid, so they don't care as much.
Yeah, and they probably treat their partners like garbage.
Total garbage.
But I do sympathize with some of these people to some degree. And here's where the analogy to Trump voters comes in, and I think there is a bit of overlap here. It's easy to say, fuck those people. They're deplorables. It's not my job to educate you. We don't want to understand this or empathize with it because that's somehow inherently offensive. All we can do is try to keep you from power. And I understand the impulse and I feel it too, but it's not ultimately very constructive. And
are you saying as socialists we want to get to the structure, the roots, or the radical solution to these problems?
Yeah, I mean, and it's you can do it on a personal and a political level, right? I'm not saying hug an incel today, but just to use one example, there was a guy who was extremely creepy to me and my friend at a DSA event recently.
What's his name?
And I'm not going to name any
What's
names.
his social security number?
No.
Branch, at least.
But
Is he at the convention? It's Dave. It was Mike. I know.
John. It was John.
No comment.
Yeah, it was John, Mark, Dave.
But if this had happened at one of my bars, like Alphaville or whatever, I would have
Antifada, by the way, has a whole chain of bars. Very much like TGI Fridays, but the decor is a little different. So, sorry, your bars. Go ahead.
Yeah, if it had happened at one of my, regular hangs, like Alphaville or whatever, I would have just had him 86 from that place forever. Fuck this guy. But since it was in the space of the DSA, I was like, no, I want to be the change I wish to see in the world and have a mediated conversation with him. This guy, he's probably socially awkward, probably a bit lonely, maybe has some substance abuse problems. So we had a nice conversation.
Wait, did you actually bring in a mediator?
Yeah.
There's
we
a process
did.
now, right?
Officially?
The process is not yet set in stone, and this actually inspired me to join the committee to create the grievance process.
Fuck yeah, thank you for your service.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. But and they asked me, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I think it should be the same
You said,
for
I
everyone.
want to kick him out, and I want to send him some rare Pepes.
Oh, no.
And,
Pepe starter pack?
Yeah.
No, because that's always the fear, right? If you're too mean to these guys, they turn into Pepes. So I was like, no, I'm going to, be a bigger person than I usually am and have a nice little talk with him, explain what he did that was bad, and give him an opportunity to apologize and move on. And that's exactly what happened.
I don't think, for the record, that it's an unbig person thing to write off somebody who mistreats. Just for the record.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, yeah, at the
It's
bar,
a lot
it's
to
one
ask
thing,
of people.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a lot to ask of women or any marginalized population. So I understand the liberal resistance and the general resistance to it, but it's also not always that productive if we're trying to change hearts and minds, And I really am afraid that guys like that are especially vulnerable to this type of rhetoric and this type of ideology.
I mean, of course, there's a backlash effect.
Oh, backlash. I want to talk about backlash. You do it. So, the backlash you mentioned, I think that is a huge part of this, because for every struggle for equality, for every struggle for rights. And certainly the left has won that battle, or we thought we won it completely, starting in the 60s and coming up to today, in terms of accepting, people no matter their gender, their race, ethnicity, religion, this, that, and the other thing, which are universal things that we should all want, right? In terms of gender, amazing gains have been made. But as
sweet gains, bruh.
Sweet gains. Nice gams. There was, for every gain, right, that a marginalized group creates in a competitive political environment, right, of scarce resources and hierarchies and stuff like that, there is a loss, right? So there was and is a real loss of traditional conceptions of of masculinity, right, and manhood. You understand what I'm saying, Jamie, right? Like, the breadwinner conception still, it has a hold in men's minds when they're a stay-at-home dad and say the wife or the partner is out making more money than them. It causes real angst, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so we see this this sort of compensation, I think, for this loss of this traditional masculinity, not only in behavior, but also in terms of subjectivity, right? How people view themselves. And this expressed itself, of course, in ideology. So, to kind of bring everything together again and end it, you've got this this marketing culture, right, that uses these appeals and these aspirations of a very commodified, sexual free environment. You have this normalization of sexual exploits and the ability of men and women to get laid in entertainment.
Yeah, and sex as like a badge of honor that makes you like a big cool man. Like
that was always a big thing, but now I think
like the Hugh Hefner ideal. It's not really about pleasure. They might think it is, but
was Hefner
it's about
pleasure?
impressing your friends and numbers and numbers. How many people?
Yeah, right. And like, making another notch on your belt or like looking like a big man to the other guys. That's what the Hugh Hefner thing was all about. And having power over other people. It's not really about pleasure.
And making money, right? Of course, because he made a lot of money over a long time. So, but these inequalities, right, that exist nowadays, they do actually produce what these incels and these men rights people are talking about, right? You do have a set of people who make more money and have higher status and do have more access to sexual partners, whether they're men or women, or other. And you do have a whole series of people now who don't have job opportunities and cannot afford to go out on a Tinder date or even download the app, right? You have these
app is free. Whatever.
And it's kind of gendered to assume that the men would have to pay for the date. Although, of course, that's gendered on their assumption, not yours.
Oh, thanks for getting to gendered assumptions. Thanks for helping me with that segue there. So again, we have, the nuclear family and the extended family dissolving under economic and other pressures, right? And you also have, you guys talked earlier about, why don't these kids like form a club or something like that? There used to be in the United States, like, I'm not saying these are great institutions, like Boy Scouts that you went out to the woods. They had Kiwanis clubs, homosocial activities like being a volunteer firefighter, right? Not sitting in your basement, like, talking shit, calling somebody a faggot on some PlayStation game, like with your buddies who you're in a clan with and they live all over the world. So there is a real material basis for this alienation.
And this also goes back to this idea of expecting it as something that you deserve.
Yes.
Because speaking of volunteer fire departments, which is like just amazing thing, regardless. Also, like if you are a guy in your basement only playing video games, not getting laid, and want to get laid, joining a fucking volunteer fire department is like, come on, like there are options.
You're in the pink.
You can put in work. Like if you want women to find you attractive, put in work and do things that will please them.
Yeah, because once upon a time, these men might have had partners just by virtue of being men with a certain amount of means.
Who were actually guaranteed some kind of job, particularly as white men, like they would have a job and support a woman and would automatically baseline like guaranteed entitlement, like you will have a wife.
And it was like a thing that people just did. Like if
Yes,
you were a woman,
yes.
you were expected to get married and have kids. Whereas
And the man,
now
yeah.
we have way more options than that. And that is scary to men because that gives them less power.
If I'm
over
too
us.
shitty to women, I might not end up with a wife.
This is a huge fucking thing because this gets us back to history, which is very important. Under, middle-aged, feudal relations, and still across the world, the parents decided who the kids would marry, or the yenta, or the rabbi, or the priest, or whoever it was. They would decide parentally who would be the partner for the other. Then we had this idea of the love match, right, where you're supposed to choose a partner, but that happened right out of high school. You formed a household, right? You made a family, and then boom, it was the biggest thing in your entire life. Nowadays, right, people wait until they're, 30, 35 years old to get married, and there's all this freedom, to explore yourself and explore your world, which again is a wonderful thing. I'm not
It makes
shitting
for
on
better
that.
relationships for sure. Divorce rates are down among millennials.
It makes for a better lot of things,
But there are negative consequences
exactly.
for some people.
And what I want to talk about, just to finish it out, is that I think that the incel and the manosphere and the MGTOW communities, they're actually a reflection of the contradictions within bourgeois ideology. Do you buy it, or should I explain it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I buy it yet because I feel like misogyny is something much more fundamental than like bourgeois capitalism. I think its roots are deeper in our society. But I'm kind of uneducated and would like to hear your argument.
Well, my new friend, allow me to give you an argument.
Fuck yeah, learning.
So you have these sets of contradictions, right, that you saw in the Elliot Rodgers horrific video. Also in a lot of just the conversation that we've had as people who unfortunately are familiar with this whole manosphere scene, right? You have on the one hand this obsession with competition between alphas and betas and cucks and normies,
Which,
and
by
all
the
this
way,
shit, which is very capitalist.
Is not those terms come from a study of wolves, which was later discredited by its own author.
Are you saying that a bunch of 14-year-olds on 4chan are not using the correct and valid citations for their worldview? I'm shocked and appalled. So you have this conception of like competition, which is real, right? But then you also have guys like Elliot Rodgers says in the video, he wants affection, right? He wants a partnership. He wants somebody to love and to love him back. There's a contradiction there, competition versus partnership. You also have in this day and age, this abundance of sexual experiences that people can have, right? If you're so lucky in an urban area, right? You can explore your gender fluidity. You can have many, many partners. You can do all sorts of fun and awesome sexual things. But
we got gays, we got straights, we got genderqueers, we got
hear-
people who don't even believe in monogamy.
we got
It's
otters,
crazy.
we got otters, we got twonks, we got 400 genders.
I hear you're allowed to do it in rural areas now too.
Oh, hell yeah. It's
Maybe
not just
with your-
sheep anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, that was... I'm
So
sorry.
I was gonna make
Cut that
some
out, Andy.
offensive
We don't
joke.
want angry tweets.
Girls still the lead.
We just-
oh my
we just- we
god.
just-
Bumfuck DSA is coming after you.
We just lost Lawrence, Kansas DSA. So, like, again, I'm making these sort of contradictory sort of analyses of it, right? So, you have this abundance of sexual experiences, but then also you have this idea that it's a zero-sum game, that there's only, like, a certain amount of, like, I hate to say it, but that's what they say, pussy out there in the world, right? And the Chads are taking all of it, right? It's like this scarce resource. You also see in the Rogers piece, too, that he sees these women as instruments, right? As subhuman objects, as like meat socks to, put your penis into. But also at the same time, and this is actually very similar to anti-Semitism, right? These manosphere folks
Conniving.
also see women as all powerful too, right? As using their,
Extremely,
sexual appeal to control men in society. It's this sort of,
Yeah,
it's a
it's
very
This
similar
viewing
thing
of the
to.
disenfranchised group as secretly
It is
controlling.
reverse racism.
It's
the same conception as reverse racism.
It's the same thing. It goes back to the Trump shit and the politics of aggrievement and making the oppressor look like the victim and vice versa.
Exactly, which is the oldest trick the devil ever pulled.
And or like maybe these people are oppressed in some way, but they're completely misplacing the blame for it.
That's what I'm getting at.
Again, something that they actually have power over, which is like an individual woman, as opposed to like capitalism, which we don't have power over.
This is our big problem on the left, is our explanations are really long and dense and hard to understand. But they're right.
Yeah, that's why we need some pithy bullet points like socialism. Have better sex.
Yes, exactly. So just to finish out my long fucking spiel about this, so you have this other contradiction too, which again comes out of the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s, of a men's rights movement that's all about libertine, banging Ukraine, banging Turkey, banging Afghanistan, whatever, right?
Oh, we did that all right.
Yeah, God, that was bad. I shouldn't have said the A word. But then you also have a huge split, with this traditionalist sense too, that men should be gentlemen, and that there's this traditional form of but it's a secularized one, right? Because that's the era we live in. It's a secularized justification for traditional relationships between men and women based on hierarchy. And the last thing I'll say, and then I will not drop the mic, because that's not only a bad old joke, but also these mics are on stands and belong to your boss. But you see this in the Elliot Rodgers and a lot of this talk too, right? Is that, and I hate to say this word, right? There is this relationship, this contradictory relationship between wanting affection, right? Wanting true connectedness, wanting love and care, right? And the ultimate threat that these people love to fall back on the internet, and God forbid in real life, which is rape. All right. So they have this contradictory thing where we want to appreciate women. We want their affection. Right. Oh, but if you're, a fucking Stacy, we're just going to come hide in the bushes and, you know what I'm saying. Right. So it's a very contradictory ideology, but it does express real, I think, currents that exist in our economy and our culture and just the way that society is structured. So in that way, we can not, become homeboys with these, basement dwelling, mouth breathing douchebags, right? But at least try to understand the conditions that make incel a thing that you have to talk about in the news.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to fight something, the most important thing is to understand it. And that doesn't mean we're giving them a pass. It just means that we understand that this stuff is not created in a vacuum. It's not this ahistorical force that we can't do anything about. There are historical and material reasons for what's going on. And once we can figure that out, like Sean said, you don't have to have sex with these people. You don't have to be their best friend, but you can try to do something to fix it.
And also too, we need to remember that despite all the gains of the last 40, 50 years, God, the last 200-300 years, when women win rights, when racial minorities win rights, when workers win rights, those are always open to a backlash and a counterattack. And that's what we're seeing now. And we have to be at the forefront of pushing against this backlash and making sure that not only the gains of the past are held on to, but that we're pushing them forward beyond the bonds of what liberal capitalism can offer.
I want to talk about, I want to go into that because I think there's kind of a middle ground between like incels and, just kind of like right-wing trash men who treat women like commodities, and like thinking about somebody like Jordan Peterson, who puts so much emphasis on like personal responsibility. I can't remember.
He's a surrogate dad, yeah, for the lobster people.
Oh, definitely. We gotta wrap it up though.
But yeah. Let's forget about that.
No. Is it a good story?
I don't know. I don't know exactly how it would take way too long.
All right. In conclusion, we need to build some sex robots so these people can have companionship of a sort, and that's going to solve all the problems forever. The end.
Well, I do have one maybe valuable thing, which is, this question of how valuable socialism is to like curing or helping or dealing with these misogynists. To a certain extent, there are people who are too deep into it and you're never going to convert them. But we're always looking to the new generation, and people who are like growing up in a culture, and I think there are a lot of people people who consider themselves disenfranchised or even just like losers or outcasts or alienated in some way, who are turning to socialism now because of like cultural things and like comedy things. And so, these are, this term fail sons, like there are these fail sons who are maybe, like one or two, like, maybe they came across like a socialist comedy podcast before they came across the fucking red pill thing. And, like now, they're here with us. And like, and at a certain extent, you can have these awkward encounters at DSA meetings with people who are maybe like not like fully woke on the feminism thing yet, or like aware of how to, but like maybe those people are people who would have been like totally fucking red pilled.
Yep.
I know.
And
That's
so
why I deal with them.
yeah, and I by no means am like people should have to deal with them because otherwise they'd be red pill people. Like if fuck that, if like somebody in the streets, you fuck them, like you have your individual agency to do whatever the fuck you want. But as far as like what can like socialism and leftist ideas do to like help us like stop more people from turning into like incels and misogynists, and like not so much like convincing people who are already men's rights people to stop being men's rights people, because I think that's a losing game. I think by talking to those people, you're just like spreading their message further, and like I'm not into that. Like, let's talk to the fucking like right-wing Trump people.
But you're talking about dealing with the root causes of this alienation and this social malaise in the short term, but actually in the medium to long term, trying to create a society where there are still going to be depressed people. There are still going to be people who don't get as much sex or affection as they want. But our goal is to decrease that as much as possible and open society up to creativity and fun and sociality and enjoyment. That's our whole project.
Hell
and
yeah.
new like social norms, as far as like I think a dude who comes into the DSA who might not like know how to talk to women, and who might say something inappropriate to women, might like you had with somebody, a productive conversation.
John David Mark, yes.
where they actually learn something and realize that like being rejected by a woman isn't like the worst thing that could